was the summer of 2014, and for my son's bar mitzvah present, just like many Jewish parents, we wanted him to bond with the Holy Land. Oh, it worked perhaps too well. My husband had stayed back at the hotel, and our friends, my son and I, had just stopped in a pharmacy.
Run to the bomb shelter, sweetie, please hurry. I didn't hear the sirens at first, but the Israelis did. They're used to hearing these things. We ran to the back of the storeroom. It was a 12-foot by 24-foot windowless bomb shelter. My heart's pounding. Boom! Boom! I hear and feel the percussion of the exploding bombs. I'm trying not to get sick. I look at my 13-year-old son and I think I'll never forgive myself if something happens to him.
That's an excerpt from a speech I gave to the Orange County Jewish Bar Association. It was the first, but not the last time we had to run to a bomb shelter. Our adventure and my transformation is also the subject of my book, Blasted from Complacency, A Journey from Terror to Transformation in Israel. There is no chapter in a parenting book on what to do when a war starts and you're on a family vacation. Think touring extraordinary and sacred sites mixed with cowering in bomb shelters. I'm still trying to get over the Jewish guilt of taking my son to war for his bar mitzvah present. The impact of being human targets helped me understand the plight of Israelis living like this, and it also made me want to work on peace. How Israel is often described on the news is not what I'd seen with my own eyes. And I felt Palestinian parents also preferred their children playing safely in their backyards. The missiles exploded just near enough to blow apart my world as I knew it, forever changing me. And you'd never recognize my life today with what it was like then. I believe I found my life's purpose. Hello, I'm Penny ST, and I'm the host of Peace with Penny. We're excited to start our 5th season. On our show, we interview Israeli and Palestinian peace organizations. I know what you're thinking, must be a short series. But seriously, there are literally hundreds of these peace organizations working together at the grassroots level, many for decades. In this season, we'll continue interviewing Israeli and Palestinian peace organizations working together at the grassroots level. These organizations are using a variety of approaches to promote peace, from education and sports to medicine and the arts. We believe that the voice of reason should be louder than the extremists that we often see on our TV sets, don't you? We want to show the world that there is hope for peace in the Middle East. We're committed to giving a platform to the organizations that are working to make that dream a reality. We've had over 75 interviews with incredible organizations, and we thank you for your interest. We hope you've enjoyed the show, and we've loved bringing the work of these extraordinary peace organizations to you. Today, we'll be speaking with Brian Reeves of the Alliance for Middle East Peace, or ALMEP. ALMEP is a coalition of over 160 organizations and tens of thousands of Palestinians and Israelis building people-to-people cooperation, coexistence, equality, shared society, mutual understanding, and peace among their communities. They add stability in the times of crisis, foster cooperation that increases impact, and build an environment conducive to peace over the long term. Founded in 2006 and headquartered in Washington, D.C., ALMEP envisions a Middle East in which its community of Palestinian and Israeli peace builders lead their societies toward and beyond a sustainable peace. To that end, ALMEP works to increase its members' financial and human resources and provides a global platform for their visibility. ALMEP's direct advocacy has led to over $300 million in funding for Israeli and Palestinian peace building. In the region, ALMEP's team supports its member organizations with a variety of programs and services designed to scale their aggregated impact. I'd like to begin with a clip that describes ALMEP's work and impact.
I support ALMEP because
they make a real difference.
They empower Palestinian and Israeli peace builders.
They give me hope for peace in the Middle East.
As an AllMap supporter, I see an incredible impact for my gift.
Honestly, I know no other organization where my support goes so far.
The Alliance for Middle East Peace is the largest and fastest growing network of Palestinian and Israeli peace builders.
Over 150 grassroots organizations that are flipping the script, doing the hard work of bringing Arabs and Jews, Israelis and Palestinians together.
AllMap's purpose is to support and scale its members' work.
How do they do it?
In two interconnected ways.
First, AllMap's expert on-the-ground team provides services to its members.
All kinds of essential resources and programs based on cooperation.
From training and advice to capacity building, crisis management, and more.
All the things that these peace builders must have to thrive and grow.
Empowering thousands of people to bring change to millions.
Helping Palestinians and Israelis become partners.
Building lasting and sustainable peace.
The second way AllMap supports its members is by unlocking remarkable amounts of money for their work.
Over the last decade, AllMap's advocacy has secured over $130 million, mostly from the U.S. government.
And in 2020, they went on to unlock a further $250 million.
The largest ever investment in Israeli-Palestinian peacebuilding.
And all this with a small global team.
No donation I've ever made has had that impact or return on investment.
And there's still more to come.
AllMap is now working to create an international fund for Israeli-Palestinian peace.
By leveraging that $250 million to move other governments around the world to invest in Middle East peace building.
To create a lasting foundation upon which peace can be built.
To be clear, it's our private donations that allow AllMap to do its job and unlock these massive funds for the peace-building field.
AllMap doesn't receive a dime from its government advocacy. Those funds go directly to the peace builders.
That's why I support AllMap.
Because I've never seen a more strategic or tangible approach to peace building.
Because AllMap's vision for the future gives me hope that, with the right resources, real peace and equality are possible.
Because, put simply, my donation's impact is huge.
Please join us.
Support AllMap.
And make Middle East peace possible.
Today, we'll be discussing AllMap's work, their success in getting Congress to allocate $250 million to help Israeli and Palestinian peace organizations in the region, and their recent peace conference, Unite the Field. With that, I'd like to welcome Brian Reeves, AllMap's Director of Development and Regional Advocacy. In this capacity, he works with local and international stakeholders in the region to advance AllMap's strategy, provides consultations to members on MEPA and fundraising, and manages AllMap's own fundraising operation. Good morning, Brian.
Hi, Penny. Thanks for inviting me and allowing me to kick off the 5th season.
It's great to have you. Well, I think we've all gotten a great overview of AllMap, but how would you describe the most important activities that AllMap engages in to achieve their goals?
Yeah, sure. We call it the dual approach. So on the one hand, we unlock large funding streams, typically from government donors, convincing them that they should be supporting the peace-building field. All those organizations, Israeli, Palestinian, working in peace-building programs. So we convince them to fund the field, and then at the same time, we work here in the region to help those NGOs build their capacity, network, and achieve some form of collective impact. And the more impact they achieve, the more funding it is easier to unlock, and sort of that cycle continues until we've hit a critical mass of active constituents pursuing peace.
So these are the AllMap leadership staff. Could you talk a little bit about Avi and John and Huda?
Yeah, so the man on the left, this is really the story behind the organization. It was during the first bit of the Second Intifada when we were finding that many of the organizations supporting peace on both sides were really facing the strongest challenges. And a lawyer from Maryland named Avi Meyerstein came and decided he was talking to these NGOs, how can we help you? And it turned out that none of them had actually been speaking with the other. They were sort of working in silos. So he got them together. It was about 12, and he brought them to Capitol Hill to advocate together for more support for this work. And sort of in contrast to this idea that there's this peace industry that's rolling in cash. In fact, these organizations were operating on shoestring budgets. The entire budget of the peace-building field for the decade before the Second Intifada was less than half the cost of an Israeli tank, right? So vastly underfunded compared to other efforts like diplomacy or confidence and security building measures. This work at the grassroots level to lay that foundation for intersocietal work for cooperation and trust building, to create a conducive environment for peacemaking, that was lacking. And so it was Avi's vision to help kickstart what ended up being over a decade of work to get over $10 million in U.S. funding unlocked and sent to the peace-building field year on year. And of course, in 2020, as the video showed, we were able to get Congress to pass a law that would give $250 million over 5 years to the field. That's about a five-fold increase per year in funding year on year. The man in the middle is John Linden. So he's our executive director. He's the one currently running ALMEP from Paris. ALMEP started in the U.S., but really we're trying to be an international movement. Our idea is to create an international fund for peace. What that means is that U.S. investment is great, but what we really want is to see similar amounts of investment by other key players in the world. And really the main other key player is Europe there, right? It's going to be the US, Europe. We'd like to get the Arab states to also contribute a similar amount. And then the fourth leg, if you will, is private philanthropy. So these are like the main areas that tend to be funding or having some sort of stakeholder position in this conflict outside of Israel and Palestine itself. So John is there in Europe, actually. He was the Europe director trying to build a European base, and then he ended up then assuming the title of executive director, where he runs the organization. Now here in the region, though, we have number 2 in ALMEP, and that's Huda Abu Arqub. She's what you call our regional director, regional meaning Israeli-Palestinian. So she's based out of Hebron. We have a team of about 5. And remember, we talked about, in addition to unlocking funds abroad, we work here to build capacity and do networking with our member NGOs. So she is leading that operation of working with the NGOs here to build their collective capacity.
Fantastic. Members work on peace from a huge variety of ways. Can you speak about that? There's medicine and scientists, art, music, sports, whatever, and all age groups. It's incredible.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the goal here, right, is to create a mass movement of all walks of life in Israel and Palestine to work together and break down boundaries, but also forge initiatives of win-win cooperation. And that cooperation can be found in pretty much every type of sector in civil society you can find, from tech training and employment, getting people on both sides to get employed in the high-tech sector, to medicine and health. So that can be hospitals working together to share know-how, compare notes. It can be what people might typically think of the peace building or people-to-people sector, which is youth coming together to break down prejudice. It can be dialogue of any age group. It can be those on both sides trying to form new visions of what a future could look like, both at the high politics level of what a solution could look like, but also just at the grassroots how do we not just resolve this conflict, but lead a process of conflict transformation? And then there's everything else, sports, academic partnerships, environment and climate change, working together to fight that joint cause. So it really runs the full gambit.
I know when I interviewed Chess for All, Lior Eisenberg, he is one of your members, and I learned that chess is considered a sport. So I thought that was pretty interesting. But
you're right.
At any rate, so we've mentioned the MEPA funds a few times, and I'm curious, how does USAID fit into what happens with the funds?
Yeah, so USAID is the largest government aid agency in the world. It pours the most amount of money to development projects all around the world, including in Israel, Palestine. And I had mentioned how Congress had passed this MEPA, Middle East Partnership for Peace Act, as you can see, that gives $250 million to the peace-building field over 5 years. So it gives to the field through USAID or USAID. And within this, it's sort of split into two. There's two initiatives that MEPA is being funneled through. One is called Building Regional Economic Bridges. It's about a little under 25 million that goes toward projects that ultimately raise the Palestinian economy. The idea that there needs to be some economic development, especially in Palestine where it's needed most. And that will help, it won't be a substitute, but it will certainly help conditions for better cooperation and hopefully positive negotiations with Israelis. The other branch, which really ALMEP is largely concerned with, is what's called the People-to-People Partnership for Peace Fund. Now, this is a pot of funding, about $25 million a year, that is a grant activity. Any organization, any NGO can apply to get a big USAID grant. And that can range from the small grants fund, what they call small grants of $100,000 to $500,000, to the large grants fund of $500,000 to $5 million. And just imagine, just giving you an example of how large that is. If you take the EU, right, so a similar large donor, they are giving at most around $500,000 to a project. So that's just the top of the small grants fund of what USAID is doing. So it's an incredible amount, an unprecedented amount of funding that is going to peace building. And in its first year of the call for proposals that USAID has given for this MEPA funding, they got 166 applicants. They ultimately went with 9 awards. So it's highly competitive. This year, the awards will be probably doubled. There will probably be around 15 awards. But what this has done is create an opportunity for organizations to think of their wildest dreams and then to try to come up with a plausible, detailed proposal and to commit it to paper and to submit it, right? And what we have seen are some of the most far-reaching peace-building ideas. In some cases, 1,000 beneficiaries who've gone through an intensive technology experience together and then have worked on projects to help their own communities through the power of technology. So it's both Israelis and Palestinians working in each other's communities to attend to each other's needs, right? Or it's another project. It takes what already is somewhat of an existing network between Israeli and Palestinian hospitals, and it really institutionalizes that connection. So imagine if these major industries or these sectors of each side are more connected. That alone isn't going to bring peace, but it does bring a sense of closeness and positive relationships that make it easier for one day a diplomatic initiative to thrive because leaders on both sides feel that they can make those difficult compromises for peace.
Terrific. Next, we're going to discuss Unite the Field 2023 and hear about all the great work that you were able to do. I know it was really successful with so many people attending with various interests. So can you talk about what Unite the Field was about?
Yeah, sure. So ALMEP puts on an annual conference that gathers its 160 organizations and whoever would like to come in those organizations, and also invites stakeholders, meaning funders that support the space, diplomats who stand up for the space here. And this year was the unprecedented largest gathering of Israeli and Palestinians, both in ALMEP's history, but when we think about it, we can't think of anything else that has happened. Again, Israelis and Palestinians who are peace builders on the ground coming together for one convening. And there are really two goals that I think we accomplished here. One is to build a sense of community, and this is what we do every year. So it's over time giving these peace builders a sense that they're not alone. Sometimes, all the time, probably, many on both sides feel that a bit beleaguered, that the majority of their populations don't necessarily support their work. And so when they come together, they see there is actually a vibrant, robust community. And the fact that it keeps growing shows them that this movement itself is building steam and interest, and people are willing to come out of the woodwork to meet and network. The other goal there is to demonstrate to these stakeholders I was mentioning, the funders, the diplomats, the sense that this community does exist, that it's growing, that it's networking and consolidating, and that the place to be and to show yourself is at this place. And so we were able to get over 200, so we were able to get over 20 countries in some way represented at this conference, and that included 8 ambassadors. And at the same time, we were able to get, double the amount of funders, including, we're talking large from the small ones to big ones such as the Schusterman Foundation, which is arguably the largest private donor in this peace building space, as well as other scaled ones. We even had a closed door session with them to discuss how to better coordinate together. And this all aligns with our general push for International Fund for Peace, where countries and private philanthropy are working together to coordinate how to best use their money to make the most effective interventions possible in the field and to support the field at its greatest need. So they were great interactions. We had some great breakout sessions, plenary sessions with big panels speaking and sharing their knowledge. But again, more than just the insights one can get from a panel, it's the sense of really networking and demonstrating the power of this community.
We're going to soon get into the various panel discussions, but a couple things we're not going to touch that much on, but I'd love for you to describe are first the private sessions that were going on.
Yeah, sure. So we had 3 public panels, right? 4 people speaking on a panel. And then we had 3 private sessions. Now, it doesn't mean that everything was, secretive. In fact, we produced summaries of each of them, but they were workshops. They were places where, for those members and stakeholders who wanted to speak more openly in a frank exchange, they could do so knowing that no piece of information would be exactly attributed to them. It would be the Chatham House rules. One, for example, is on scaling the peace building field, where funders spoke about what they would like to see more from NGOs and what NGOs thought, the funders should hear. They gave them an earful of what they think was, not being listened to. And it was a frank exchange, but one that I think came out with some good conclusions about the need for both sides to be honest about where things aren't going right, so that both of them can work together to make more effective intervention.
And you also had tables for the various peace organizations. Can you talk a little bit about that?
That's right. We have this thing every year called a members fair. So, imagine at I don't know, a APAC or J Street conference, you go and you see the booths outside, right, with the various organizations and companies that want to showcase their work. We do the same, but it's our membership. We were able to get 45 organizations to have a table and show their work, which is, again, a small amount of the larger 160. Not everyone wanted to maybe staff a booth. We'd like to make it more, but it was, I think, a really good display for anybody who wants to walk down and see what our NGOs are doing. If you're an NGO, you want to see if there's a potential partnership, or if to glean some lessons on how to better market your own work. And if you're a stakeholder, I'll give you an example. The ambassador of Slovenia, who had just connected to us, really didn't. She supports the work, but certainly didn't know the work in depth. And just by perusing those aisles for 10 minutes, she was able to have some great conversations and really get into the essence of all these members that make up this peace building tapestry.
Well, you could always point her to Peace with Penny interviews. Most of the folks that we interview are all members. Next, you touched on the dignitaries, some of the dignitaries that were at the conference, but I'd like to discuss a few in a little bit more detail. So Tor Wennesland, the UN Special Coordinator for the Middle East peace process, actually was the keynote speaker. And why did you feel it's so important for representation from the UN to join your conference?
Yeah, sure. So a couple things. The UN has an interesting place because this work itself, it isn't just Israel, right? So there are the diplomats who go to Tel Aviv, where most of the embassies are, and then there are those who go to Ramallah, where the representative offices to the Palestinian Authority are. And even though these diplomats, they know each other, some of them are in contact with each other, they really can't go to the same place. And the UN sort of acts as that neutral ground. And when we're looking for speakers, we want someone who speaks for both sort of constituencies of diplomats, that is. And so the UN is there in the middle. But the second thing, more substantively, is this specific UN office, UNSCO. This is the UN's special envoy for the Middle East peace process. It has always acted as this go-between between the Israeli government, the PA, at times going to Gaza, even speaking with Hamas, right? They sort of are there on the ground as that sort of mediator, and they have a great sense of sort of the challenges, because they're hearing on both sides. They're not just in a silo in one of the capitals or main cities, right? Trying to hearing one narrative, and so it's always been important over time to engage the UN. At the same time, they both, Tor Wennesland and his predecessor, Nikolai Mladenov, who now serves as one of the members of the U.S. MEPA advisory board, because he was seen as such a sort of neutral expert in the field, that, and I'll say as an aside, someone who bucked the trend of sort of the rap that the UN sometimes gets among Israeli circles. He was able to overcome that by showing a deep amount of empathy. And so, yeah, this office, in sum, it really has been there to sort of support what needs to happen for peace. And for that, they are saying loud and clear that supporting peace building at the grassroots level is not nice. but in fact it's a necessary component for any sort of political initiative to gain wings and to fly and to gain traction.
A couple things that he said during his speech have a profound impact on the way to work on peace. One was, you'll never in a conflict get the two sides to agree on a narrative from the past, so focus on the future. And the other thing that I think people don't necessarily realize is that the average age in Palestine or the territories is 19. And those folks weren't around when folks got along better. They weren't around for Oslo. So would you like to comment on those two facts?
Yeah, I mean, both of them speak to the importance of the grassroots. Really, in order to get politicians, again, to sort of feel comfortable to make peace, you need societies that are willing to allow them to make hard compromises. And so that needs to take into account the narratives. No one's going to give up their narrative. They're not going to give up, where they've been wronged in the past, right? This goes back to Benny Morse's righteous victims. Every side thinks that they are, the victim, but if we just look at the past, of course, and even the recent past, and play the blame game on, who scuppered the most recent deal, we're not going to get anywhere. We need to forge another narrative that's forward-looking, that talks about a vision where we can both maintain our dignity and our history and traditions and our beliefs about what has happened, while at the same time having space to cooperate in a positive, more than zero-sum situation. So I think that was profound what he said there. On the issue of youth, while certainly Palestinians have a younger demographic, Israelis also have a very young demographic. There is not quite symmetry, but it's much closer than what you would see Israel compared to Europe or Israel compared to the US, right? And it means that most people in these younger generations, up to 30, they grew up not knowing the euphoria and the sense of hope. They know a sense of, all they know is the Second Intifada and on, where it's just been stagnation and disillusionment and separation, right? A lack of seeing each other, and that is unfortunately a self-perpetuating process of, if you fear the other side, you're going to be angry at the other side. You're not going to be willing to consider some other vision of connection and peace. And so we have noticed that there has been what we call a youth radicalization on both sides, and we've documented this. We did a poll in 2020, and we're actually about to come out with a new poll, so there's some spoilers in here, but they ultimately point to the same things, which are unfortunately that while there has been lots of support and funding at the diplomatic level, at the level of what we call confidence and security building measures between security forces, that wasn't able to stop the conflict because there wasn't a commensurate amount of support at the grassroots level, as we had talked about. And what we have seen over time, that neglect to support the grassroots level and to try to change opinions has led those on the extremes to be very successful in getting their opinions across uncontested, right? Especially when there is no political horizon of the leaders. It's very easy to say, okay, I want an easy narrative of why I'm wrong, why I'm right, and the other side is wrong, and there's nothing I can do, and maybe only violence is the way. And so we have seen, in Israel, right, a rise of extremist views, which are now in the government, and the Palestinian side, you see a rise of rogue militias that eschew both the PA and Fatah, but also Hamas. These are all the status quo, and they make their own militias, the Lion's Den and such, that are led by people under 30. And this is what we have to fight. Without getting into it, we have also documented that our peace-building programming, when done right, these interventions can disrupt the prejudices, the ingrained prejudices on both sides, and people can come out of it wanting to work genuinely with the other side on solutions that are win-win.
Awesome. So the German ambassador to Israel, Stefan Seibert, was there. And can you comment, what is Germany's continued support of the peace movement? How does that help?
Sure. To give a bit of a background, we had talked about the UN, so that was the neutral one, and then we had both ambassadors and we had people on the representative side speaking, and then we also try to balance between the two main actors on the diplomatic level, which are the United States and Europe. And Germany, as many of you know, right, is the largest economy and one of the most generous supporters of peace-building civil society. They have this set of foundations linked to the political parties that give massive amounts. The German government also gives its own funding. And of course, Germany has its historical role regarding Israel, right? A sense of the new Germany, a sense of needing to demonstrate that it will support Israel in making it a more prosperous democratic place, working with it. And so Israel today, I mean, it bears mentioning, aside from the US, Germany may be one of Israel's only what you call a strategic partner or an ally where aside from the US, Germany does provide military support through sales of weapons and whatnot. So there is a special role there. But aside from that, going back to civil society, they're a robust supporter, and we had Ambassador Seibert speak. He is actually a bit of a personality in Germany. He was a news TV journalist that was well known. He was appointed by Angela Merkel. When she left, he stayed around despite the new government, and he spoke quite eloquently about supporting the peace building field, but also making very sure that this work itself relies a lot on supporting the legitimacy of both sides to be there in that land. And one thing that peace building does is it is the opposite of efforts to sort of separate, to boycott. It's saying by meeting each other and breaking down boundaries and coming with purpose-driven positive solutions where both sides are getting something tangible out of it, this is how we make peace. You're not going to make peace, or we're not going to solve this issue by having what someone described as a politics of victory and defeat. No one's going to win and lose here. Everyone's going to lose if it's a game of who wins and who loses, right? What we need here is a politics of compromise, of people learning to live with each other and to make compromise, which means you're not going to get everything you want, and it also means that this is really accepting reality. But this isn't just a peace where you sign a treaty. We as Israelis and Palestinians, we are destined to live with each other. This is the reality, the demographic reality. We live together, and we have to forge some form of common destiny because neither of us is going away.
Right, for sure. And George Salem, the chairman of the Partnership for Peace Fund, he also attended. Who is he and what is that organization all about?
So George Salem is an American who is the head of the MEPA Advisory Board. This is not an official board, but one that advises the direction of how the MEPA funding can be spent. This is that U.S. funding. And the board has consisted of people who were appointed by members of the Senate, and that's split down the middle between Republicans and Democrats. This reflects the bipartisan nature of how MEPA was passed and how we would like it to continue to be seen as, the sense that it doesn't matter your politics, the idea of breaking down prejudice and supporting positive cooperation between both sides is a fundamentally apolitical thing that there are people on both, Democrats and Republicans and left and right in other countries that support it, and it should be maintained as this sort of robust bipartisan issue where many other issues, do not get that support. So George Salem, he's actually a Bush Republican. So he was flying in from the U.S. and he gave a keynote, and for us, it's true, we want to create an international fund for peace. We want everyone to be supporting more funding to the ground, but certainly MEPA holds a special place in our organization's history. The fact that this is the highlight, the key of what we have been able to pass. And if MEPA succeeds, it's a great sales tool to help us go to European countries and private philanthropy to say that the field is in fact ready to take in funding at such a high level. If you invest now, we will build that impact between societies. We have the means. Just give us the ability to reach out further.
Well, I certainly agree, and I've already got a couple on the schedule so far. I've got both EcoPeace and Project Rosanna, who were a couple of the first-year recipients, to hear what exactly did they do with the fund so far, and I'm looking forward to speaking with them. I had previously interviewed them, but now they have some really significant money backing them, and let's hear what they've been able to accomplish with it. Next, we're going to speak about the 3 panels that were at Unite the Field.
Certainly.
So the first one was called Analyzing This Moment of Volatility, Threats and Opportunities for Peace Builders to Shape the Agenda. And as you can see, there are a number of panelists. A number of them are all MEP members. And can you talk about this particular panel?
Sure. I think what we were really looking at this one has in part to do with what's going on in Israel right now with the anti-judicial overhaul, democracy protest, if you will. Is that, and then also understanding there's been increased violence and fighting. It was certainly not only this new Israeli government, but since that has happened, there's been sort of an increased sense of tension that has boiled over in the West Bank, right? And that is the moment of increased volatility. It's the cross-border element, and then inside Israel, everything we're seeing on the streets. So we had Eran Nissan, who is a youth leader in the democracy protests, and he talked about the need to gradually work with the leaders and people who come out to these protests, and to get them to develop a conflict-centered analysis of this judicial overhaul, that it's not just a domestic issue, it's one that's very connected to the agenda that the far right in the Israeli government is looking to pass. You have Nidal from the Palestinian Peace Coalition, which is really the Palestinian side of the Geneva Initiative movement, so a two-state solution movement. He was speaking about sort of the challenges for getting people to believe in political vision, given all the lack of a political horizon. There is certainly, on both sides, no sense of a sense of moving forward diplomatically, and sort of what needs to change to bring up hopes again. You have Ksenia Svetlova, the president of ROPES, it's a peace building organization, as you know, that brings in the regional Arab MENA element, and how you can harness, among other things, the Abraham Accords to not be a bypass road, but a bridge to supporting Israeli-Palestinian peace. And then you have Maysam Jaljuli, the Palestinian citizen of Israel, CEO of Tzofen, a large All-Map tech NGO, who also doubles as a grassroots leader of Standing Together, which is a grassroots direct action movement that preceded these protests, and sort of giving her 2 cents as a Palestinian Arab citizen of Israel. What are the reasons why the community is not joining in, but where there is opportunity if we change some of the narrative to create a more robust, inclusive movement against these judicial protests, which is their agenda there.
Great. Okay. And then our second discussion was building a stronger ecosystem, solidarity, diversity, and strengthening civil society. What was that all about?
Okay, let me just look at the names. Right. So this is another, I think, point that a lot of people are concerned about with peace building, or they always ask this question, are you engaging the full breadth of these societies, or are you just speaking to, some elite in their bubble? And certainly, we will know that the peace building field does engage more than, sort of this reputation. But we wanted a panel that really demonstrates this. So we brought in Alec Isaacs of Siach Shalom, which works between religious leaders in Jerusalem and elsewhere, so Muslim, Jewish, Christian, and tries to solve some of the religious elements of the conflict through shared understanding in ways that Oslo just failed to do, that it couldn't do on its own from its secular model. I won't go through everybody and everything they do, but the idea is there are those who talk about the shared society element inside Israel, how you build a more equal society, especially, again, harnessing the democratic movements right now, and how do you build solidarity between the shared society and the wider cross-border conflict. How can those organizations that work inside Israel also be more active in sort of this larger peace-building movement between Israelis and Palestinians at the political level? Just one more point here. You have Gershom Baskin.
He's quite a mover and shaker amongst the peace.
Sure. Yeah, negotiated the Gilad Shalit deal and is well known as sort of a veteran in the space. In that sense, it's making sure that our civil society peace building is reaching out to everybody of different faiths, of different religiosity, those in marginalized groups in the periphery, or making sure in Palestine, not just the elites, but also those who have maybe been overlooked traditionally by the peace movement there, and really coming up with how do we make a more inclusive peace building field so it can be more effective.
Terrific. And I didn't want to leave out Itach Ma'aki because they're a group of women lawyers that Peace with Penny has interviewed previously, but women, and they're disproportionately negatively impacted by armed conflicts, which was affirmed by the passage of UN Resolution 1325. So can you talk a little bit about what that is and the impact on women and on the positive impact of getting women involved in peace negotiations and peace work, because they truly give a different perspective to the entire process.
Yeah, exactly. It's more than just a perspective. In every society, you have some extent of women being excluded from the defense and foreign policy realms, right? And in Israel and Palestine, this is very pronounced. The sense of it's an ongoing conflict. This is this is a room for generals to talk, this is a room for men to talk, and so women have largely been excluded. Defense and foreign policy here, they go hand in hand. The idea of feminist foreign policy isn't just to get a woman's perspective. It's to create a more robust perspective, but also to fight against just a militant perspective in general, women and men. And 1325, Resolution 1325 of the UN, really calls for foreign policy, and I would throw defense in there too, to reflect more of the actual population, which especially is women again, and to also make sure beyond the halls of decision making that girls are included more in society, so that you're not just working with those at the top to maybe find some token woman to join a meeting, but to actual fight back against this patriarchal nature of societies, but and the machismo nature, especially of Israeli Palestinian societies being in a conflict zone. If we can solve that, it's going to make peace building a lot easier. And Itach Maki, so this is the shout out to them. Yeah. They were able to get the Israeli government back in 2014 to adopt 1325. The idea of the Israeli government needs to operate on a more feminist foreign policy. Now, I wish I could talk about impact more, and they'll tell me themselves that the problem is, while that resolution was adopted, it was never implemented, right? Governments, they adopt things and then they don't necessarily do them, even if there's money to dish out. So that's the uphill battle still today that they are pushing for. But in the meantime, Itach Maki started as a shared society organization inside Israel, and it's moved its purview to cross-border work as well, to support what I think is working here. My colleague Huda Abu Arkoub could speak much better at this than I can, but I'll channel what she's saying. While feminism and equality is universal, the ways in which feminism is sometimes talked about can often have sort of a Western angle to it, and it needs to be more of a language that is local based, feminist language that is local, in order to have it resonate more in societies. And so our members and ALMEP itself are working to come up with that language, to research and hear from people what is the most effective way to argue feminism, because it can't just be, oh, this is how it worked in the United States. Okay, we're going to apply that model here. It's not going to work. So the good thing, though, is there are many people who have pointed out this need, and they are working together on how best to sort of change these ingrained ways of how things are done here.
Well, the very strong religious overtones that add to that, and what women are quote unquote allowed to do under those constraints. Thankfully, I would say here it's a different issue, although we have plenty of our own issues in the U.S. that still are inadequate.
If I could, though, I think what we found is where one of the biggest issues here is religion. Yeah, it's a major part of life, and at the same time, there are many ways that you can argue, even within a religious prism, Islamic, Jewish, in the Orthodox sense, right? You can argue for feminism, and it's using that it's working in that realm that will be arguably most effective, and that the secular, it might make more sense to argue feminism from a secular standpoint somewhere else, but here it just does not resonate.
Right, because it's
so
just pervasive.
Right. again, Huda would, have a great lecture on integrating feminism with Islamic thought, and how just because right now it's very patriarchal doesn't mean that that's the only way, that in many ways it's been corrupted, and that the true way of Islam is equality, and that runs through equality of women.
For the final panel discussion you had was Think Global, Act Local. Can the diplomatic community and Israeli-Palestinian civil society come together and build a cohesive strategy for peace and equality? So can you talk about some of the points that they were making?
Oh yeah, this was a panel of real all-stars, really in the diplomatic realm, right? Everyone from, well, again, my colleague Huda right there in the foreground, to the EU. You have George representing USAID, so the U.S. perspective. Yael Braudo, who's representing Women Wage Peace, a grassroots direct action organization of women of many different political stripes on Israel-Palestinian, and then Gil Murciano, the head of Mitvim, there in the back near my other colleague Kari, who is moderating. So Gil, Mitvim is it supports a progressive foreign policy in Israel, as opposed to it's in the U.S. you have think tanks of different political bents. In Israel, the think tank space has typically been people who come from the military or affiliated with some academic institution like the Hebrew University. So Mitvim is a think tank that is not that. It's neither, and they're coming up with their own. They're amassing many different experts in different fields to form some sort of foreign policy that is peace positive. So they're not a member, but they're a partner. The idea of of the panel itself is in many ways what ALMEP is talking about, the sense of working with stakeholders, both here, but then also the stakeholders around the world, especially Europe and the US, though, to have them better support this peace building field, and to also ground what we do in sort of the larger global trends of the field, so that people understand the importance of this region, even if they can't feel directly what's going on here.
Well, terrific. So how's it going as far as ALMEP's work trying to get more of an international focus in helping with raising funds and this kind of peace work? How's it going?
Well, we are leveraging MEPA. That's like, in a nutshell, what we are doing. The idea of, now that we have this $250 million from the US, we're going around to private philanthropy and to Europe, the EU, but then also the individual member states. And we're saying, look, the US has now dramatically increased its support to the peace building field. We would like you to also increase at a similar rate. We don't want this sort of the success in increased funding to be a US story as much as we started in the US. We want this to be a truly international initiative where there's buy-in and a say that is equal between Europe, the US. If the Arab states join on, then having them at it, an equal player at the table, and then also philanthropy to dramatically increase their amount collectively. And so we are trying to demonstrate what we call a ripple effect of MEPA. If you are a private funder and you see all this funding coming to the field, you don't necessarily need to fund the same thing that MEPA is funding. Now you should fund things that maybe MEPA doesn't fund, things that are maybe a little more partisan, or things that are smaller, that need seed funding, that one day could be scaled to a project that is large enough that MEPA would then help take and scale to the next level. So imagine a baton race where you need smaller funding to do the first lap and then hand off to MEPA. Or on the other side of MEPA, there's going to be a huge wave of beneficiaries of grassroots peace building program graduates who've they've been primed, they've been opened their minds, they're now starting on a journey of political awakening. So their attitudes have changed, but they haven't changed their behavior. They're not turning into active constituents for peace. What if there were programs that could be supported by private philanthropy and other donors that could take those program graduates and bring them on the next stage in their that journey of political awakening? You start in a youth group or a sports group, you learn a sense of the idea of, oh, I can work with this other side, but maybe that person needs to be re-engaged years later on, okay, and now here's this deeper political discussion, this course that you can take, right? Or maybe now we need activists in promoting ways to combat climate change between Israelis and Palestinians. Oh, you've done one of these programs before? Now this is a way that you can engage more deeply in being one of those ambassadors for peace in your societies. So the more ripple effect we create, the more demonstration of how MEPA has made just such a large impact, easier it is to get it renewed in Congress in 3 years, and the easier it is to convince other countries that, yes, the peace-building field, these NGOs, do have the capacity to absorb all this funding and to churn out completely unprecedented impact in terms of engaging their communities and really bringing change, not just at an individual level, but maybe making institutional changes in the business sector or the health sector with hospitals, as I mentioned, or policy change, right? Anything.
Speaking of policy, there's been a couple really potentially devastating laws that threaten peace building, such as this proposed 75% tax on foreign investment, and then an incredibly wonderful organization, Parent Circles Family Forum, which had high school groups working on peace. They were not allowed to do their work this time. Are you able to do anything to combat what is being faced?
On Parent Circle in general, we were part of a larger coalition that tried to combat that. At the end of the day, they're on this education ministry blacklist. They have gotten emergency funding from private philanthropy. So here again, it's very important that philanthropy is agile here. But yeah, it's an effort to keep a narrative of using pain to move on and make peace out of sort of the public consciousness. Because I think it's proof that people who are against us, they're afraid that our ideas, our transformative ideas of peace, are viral, that they're inspirational, and that there is an alternative to what these governments are selling. So with Parent Circle, it's unfortunate. We were able to see a temporary success on another issue, which was this current Israeli government tried to advance a bill that would, like you mentioned, tax NGOs that receive foreign funding 65%. They moderated it to 50%. Great, right? The aim of this is to bring about the financial ruin of NGOs that receive any sort of foreign state funding. Now, keep in mind, it's important to mention this, all Israeli civil society in general gets 60% of its funding from foreign sources. Israel gets most of its funding from abroad. And if you're a right-wing organization, you typically get it from private individuals or that will give you far more than our organizations are receiving, many-fold more. And some of these people, they don't even believe in the sort of classic Israel as a Jewish and democratic state. You had Sheldon Adelson saying, "So Israel won't be a democracy, so what?" On record, they don't repudiate it, and right. And that is funding some of these most egregious sort of anti-peace organizations. Now, if you're a organization in the peace building field, especially I would say adjacent to our space, in the human rights field or in the what you call peace advocacy field. So these are ones advocating a two-state solution. Your Peace Nows, your Geneva initiatives and whatnot, right? A good chunk of that funding will come from foreign government sources. And by the way, when we say foreign government sources, we're also talking about USAID here. We're talking about these peace-building interventions that we help to unlock funding for. We help to unlock funding as well in Canada and the UK. So that all that counts, right? Luckily, there was sort of an outcry, especially on the diplomat community, saying we're not going to let you tax, our funding that our taxpayers have made to support, democratic efforts of civil society. And it also creates a shrinking civil space inside Israel that will hurt everybody, even if you're not one of these organizations. If the government is trying to curtail this space, it's bad for everybody. And by the way, the Jewish philanthropy in general in the U.S. is being very supportive of saying, yeah, we believe in the robust space, even if it doesn't impact our direct beneficiaries. This is horrible. This is on par with what Russia's doing. And in fact, there was there's studies that show this is what Russia and China and Hungary and whatnot, right? What they try to do to curtail civil society. Many in the Jewish community who work, in civil society to deal with the hardships that Jews faced in the Soviet Union and Russia today even, they don't need to be convinced because they were working in those organizations when there started to be this, black cloud over civil society, the ability for them to operate. They've lived it themselves. We don't need to convince them.
Okay. Well, for your last question, let's get off of this ugly stuff. And what do you see as positives that are going on with ALMEP and your interactions with all of your stakeholders, whether they be peace organizations or philanthropists or diplomats? What's happening positive for the next few years, you think?
So I think there's a tremendous appetite for these donors to invest in this space, both because they've just over time seen the need to coordinate more. So it's investing more, that's great, but when you coordinate, you're able to find blind spots in the field, what's not being supported. You're able to discuss what works, what doesn't. If something doesn't work, well, can the intervention change to be more effective? It's a way to, by working together as funders, you get a better sense of how to help the field itself make more collective impact. And so that appetite is there. We have surveys on this, asking these funders this question, and they say, yes, we want to do it. So we are convening these donors now. This is what's on the radar. But more than that, again, going back to these democracy protesters, I think it's the first time where people, all can agree that there is an increased appetite for the citizens themselves to talk about the larger issues of how what's going on is related to the conflict, but then also issues of, how do you build a more inclusive society in Israel? And Palestinians are looking at what's going on, and our partners in Palestine are, behind closed doors, are saying, we're really proud of it. The idea that we yes, we have our differences, but to see people standing up and saying, no, we're not going to let you just pass laws that, we think fundamentally remove our democratic freedoms, right? I think there's a lot of hope there that what's going on in Israel will actually reverberate and support the work we're doing, and will have an effect with all of our work, including on the Palestinian side together.
Yeah, well, I definitely think all the work that your various members do supplies an incredible amount of hope. And really, there are many places where peace is viable today. Certainly, the word needs to get out about it so that the extremists aren't the only voice that's heard. Thank you to our audience for joining us for this episode of Peace with Penny. I'm so glad we were able to start off season 5 with Brian from ALMEP. Thank you so much for your time. ALMEP's work is essential to promoting peace in the Middle East. Next week, we'll be speaking with Phil Saunders from Path of Hope and Peace. They're a grassroots peace organization that's working to build coexistence between Israelis and Palestinians. I'm excited to hear how their efforts are continuing in the face of increased violence. In 2021, Path of Hope and Peace was awarded the Victor J. Goldberg Prize for Peace in the Middle East, and their model was embraced as a working prototype for conflict transformation by the Challenge Organization. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Please share the link to the recording on our YouTube channel. And if you missed any episodes from previous seasons, you can find them there too. Thank you again for your support. We hope that someday everyone will live in peace, shalom, and salam.